Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are some of the games ever. This is something that everyone's been talking about since Game Freak's latest installment in the Pokemon franchise dropped this past fall. Now that I've had some time to stew on these games and their contents almost a whole year after playing, it's given me the chance to reflect on what a complete roller coaster of a ride that it was. But where do I start? To many, these games were a complete mess, and I agree with those who express that sentiment. I've met a very small handful of Pokemon fans that genuinely enjoyed the experience, but that doesn't mean the games were outright terrible overall. So, for what it's worth, we're going to be breaking down the good, the bad, and the ugly of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Bet you weren't expecting ugly to come first, were you? We're going to be going in reverse with these sections, as I felt like ending this video on the positives of the series just felt more right. Now, let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. This game runs like garbage. Launch day for these games saw a plethora of glitches and bugs that had set Twitter in flames for days. Shader issues, models bugging out, NPCs interrupting battles. People who weren't even considering buying these games now were changing their minds solely to experience these glitches themselves. This made Scarlet and Violet the laughingstock of the internet for some time. Hell, it still is because myself and many others are talking about it right now. On top of the disaster of bugs that was day one for this game, performance issues became evident almost immediately. Overworld models do no favors for this, as the second they spawn in, they're already moving at 10 frames a second. Now, I don't play a lot of games other than Pokemon on the Switch, so for a while, I was convinced that this was just an issue with the hardware. But no. Games like Breath of the Wild and Xenoblade, which, mind you, are very similar in their open worldness, run beautifully on the Switch. Also, we had the Let's Go games, which to me are still the most beautiful looking and running Pokemon games we have on the Switch. Granted, they weren't as demanding due to the fact that they weren't open world, but that brings me to my next point. These games do not need to be open world. Yes, the concept of an open world game is very cool, especially for a Pokemon game. We got a little taste of it with the Wild Area and Sword and Shield. Very cool. I like that format. But the whole map being what is essentially just a big open circle? No thank you. For years, Pokemon has had us set out on our adventures in a very linear style. You can't go here unless you complete this. You can't go there unless you complete that. You maybe unlock some shortcuts along the way, but there's something very rewarding in getting the HM Surf in Kanto to finally go back to your hometown of Pallet and get to swim over to Cinnabar Island, or getting to Ecruteak City in Johto by watering the Sudowoodo with your squirt bottle. The best way I can describe how I feel about this game being open world is the phrase, laziness breeds laziness. There really just seems to be a lack of effort in how Game Freak designed this map, and because of that, I'm faced with many optional choices. A prime example of this, I can choose to battle the trainers if I want to, because they are no longer placed in a way where I have no choice but to battle them. You have to speak to them to initiate the battle. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, and I know this doesn't apply to everybody, if I don't have to go a certain way, I won't. I want to be forced to go a certain way. And with the open world feature being added, there is just so much empty space, which ends up overwhelming me and forcing me to make my own linear path that I made inside my head. Either that, or I just end up fast traveling everywhere once I unlock the ability to. Whew, that went longer than I expected it to. Still there? The good stuff is coming, I promise. But while you're here, feel free to hit the like button if you've liked this video so far, and subscribe to the channel as I plan to do more content similar to this. Okay, so a lot of what I had to say about the game being ugly was more so rooted in its design. I want to talk more here about the game's flaws, gameplay, and story-wise. Let's first talk about the legendary Pokemon. Look, I love legendary Pokemon as much as the next guy, but the legendaries just don't feel that legendary to me. We have the cover mascots Miraidon and Koraidon, and then the treasures of ruin, Wo-Chin, Qin Pao, Ting Lu, and Chi Yu. or Caillou. What's the pronunciation on this? Hang on. Hang on. Pronunciation. Okay, it's Chiyu. I thought it was Caillou, and that would have been pretty funny. I don't know. Some people are saying Caillou. We're gonna go with Chiyu. Anyways, back to the topic at hand. You learn little to no information about them, and they have no impact on any of the story except for the fact that you have to scour the entire map to find the 32 ominous stakes. This is, of course, unless you take the classes at the academy, which I did none of that, because I just wanted to get right into my adventure. The designs are cool, but I caught them and had no desire to use them afterward. The excitement was short-lived, if you even want to call it that. The cover mascots get a little more credit here due to the role they play in the Path of Legends story. But even so, they are technically Paradox Pokemon. They are with you through the entirety of the game, and you can literally catch a second one in the post-game. I will say, I like the designs of these guys, though. It's very bold of Game Freak to make Pokemon based off of Michi and Vert. Next, the character customization in this game. Normally, Pokemon is very versatile with this kind of thing, with Sword and Shield seeing a lot of options across the board for clothing, skin tones, and hairstyles. This time around, you're trapped within the confines of your school uniform. Now, I personally don't mess too much with the cosmetic features in the franchise, but as someone who went to a school wearing a uniform for 6 years, this makes me pretty upset. Sure, you have options when it comes to accessories like hats and glasses, and you can swap between the 4 different seasonal uniforms for whatever academy you're attending, but that's it. Oh, wait, no, hang on. There will be alternate seasonal uniforms that will be accessible when the DLC comes out. Yeah, the DLC that you pay for. Look, I don't want to sit here and get too overheated about the cosmetic features in an RPG, because it's simply not worth the waste of breath. One thing Nintendo does get right here, however, is giving the player access to more gender-neutral hairstyles and outfits, and I love that inclusivity. Now let's talk about Team Star. Oh boy. This apparently villainous team in Scarlet and Violet has to have the most convoluted and confusing story I think I have ever witnessed in the Pokemon franchise. Somehow, plots in other games where you're a 10-year-old child stopping a grown adult man from harnessing the power of Pokemon to try and end the world were easier for me to digest as a preteen than this was for me to digest at the age of 25. Essentially, the game introduces Team Star to you as a rambunctious group of students who were expelled by the Academy, given the option to disband from Team Star or accept their fate. They had a reputation for harassing other students and pressuring them into joining their efforts. Your goal in this quest line is to go to the 5 base camps that the 5 Team Star leaders have set up and take each one down. Once you start doing this, the player begins to learn that the Team Star members aren't so bad after all, and we're all victims of bullying themselves. Cool, a redemption arc. But then it starts to get way too complex for my brain. We learn that Penny / Cassiopeia, a student who ends up helping us take down Team Star, founded Team Star herself alongside these other members as an effort to get back at their bullies. But this backfires, so Penny asks the old deputy director of the academy for her to be able to take the heat for all of it, so that her friends can get off scot-free. The director says yes, people find out about this deal, he gets fired, and all the OG Academy staff quit in solidarity, I think. I can't be the only one who thinks this story is so insane, right? The idea is for you to defeat each leader of Team Star because, as their code states, they must resign if they are defeated in battle, thus eliminating any chance of them being expelled from the Academy. On top of this, you have the whole who is Cassiopeia thing looming over you the entire time. They throw a curveball at you with Clavel, or Clive, revealing himself as the leader. You get to battle him, which is sick, but then he's like, JK, and then you find out it's Penny, and then you battle her team of evolutions, and then Team Star is done? Or they're repurposed? Still not really sure, but GG, I guess. Something that goes hand in hand with the Starfall Street quest is the auto battles. Definitely an interesting feature here, but I don't entirely see the point in it. You're just running around and pressing R. Where's the skill here? Am I missing something? Still not really sure, but GG, I guess. Moving on, let's talk about the Elite Four very quickly. One of my favorite parts of playing this game was the gym challenge. It always has been during Pokemon playthroughs. The Elite Four is fun, especially when you're playing a brand new game. To my surprise, It was very challenging. Now that's all fine and good, but what I learned while writing the script for this video was that you can never challenge the Elite Four again after the first time you beat them. Kinda disappointing. I guess the game makes up for it by introducing the Academy Ace tournament in the post-game, which is also a pretty fun experience in itself. Lastly, for the bad, for a while during my playthrough, I was convinced that the levels scaled as you played depending on what quests you were doing. That would make sense, right? Apparently not. The levels in these games do not scale as you play, so you're just kind of caught with your pants down trying to figure out which gyms or bases or titans are at your level. Now normally I would love this since it forces me to follow that linear playstyle which I so desperately complained about wanting. In my case, however, I was doing a Nuzlocke run of this game, so it proved to be very, very unfortunate. Wait, I went first? It avoided the attack? Are you fucking... And no Zen headbutt? What the balls, dude? And that's all the bad stuff. Hopefully. I honestly wasn't expecting to be writing this many negative things about the game, but when everything is written out and you really start dissecting these games, well, sheesh. The very first thing I would like to draw attention to about these games is the implementation of terastallizing. For those who haven't played the new games yet, terastallizing transforms Pokemon into a gem-like version of themselves and changes its type. Each individual Pokemon has a designated Terra type, meaning when it terastallizes, it is that type and only that type. The idea of a third type that takes priority over the others is a really cool mechanic, one that always tripped me up for a second in big battles like gym leaders. The only thing I would change is getting rid of the goofy type indicator above the Pokemon's head. There are easily other ways that Game Freak could have made their Terra type visibly easy to identify without them making look so goofy. One of my next favorite things about Gen 9 is the variety in stories. The game has 3 different quest lines that you can follow in any order you'd like, and I put air quotes around any order because, as I mentioned earlier, levels do not scale as you play the game. This doesn't apply to just the gym challenge, but I digress. Aside from getting the 8 gym badges and challenging the Elite Four, you're also tasked with taking down Team Star in Starfall Street, which we also covered earlier, and the Path of Legends, where you accompany fellow student Arvin to track down Guardian Titan Pokemon that are hopped up on the sweet, savory Herba Mystica. The goal is to take these overpowered Titans down in order to gain access to the extremely rare herbs that are only found in the region of Paldea. I thoroughly enjoyed the Path of Legends story. Not only did this give you the chance to see some of the new featured Pokemon of the new generation, but feeding the Herba Mystica sandwiches to your legendary mascot/partner, sandwich time, allowed for them to gain new abilities in the overworld, similar to HMs and Ride Pokemon. Of course, going even deeper, we learn that Arvin's partner Pokemon and best friend, Mabostiff, was injured on an excursion to Area Zero in an attempt to search for his father/mother, depending on which game you had, aka the Professor. Arvin learns that the famed Herba Mystica may be the only chance he has at bringing Mabostiff back to how it was prior to the incident. And so there lies his motive for wanting to research and take down Titan Pokemon. This had to be my favorite facet of this specific questline. I feel as if very rarely in Pokemon games we get to see the raw emotional side of our adventures. The relationships between human and Pokemon being put on display really has you relating to the characters more. And listen, I will be 100% honest, I hated Arvin at the beginning of my playthrough. I thought he was annoying and spoiled and this and that, but the more the story progressed, the more I fully regretted my initial hatred for him as a character. The cutscene after defeating the last Titan and reviving Mabostiff had me literally crying, something that rarely happens to me when I play a Pokemon game. Once you complete all 3 quest lines, you're now left with a final main story quest, The Way Home, which has you venture into the great crater of Paldea that you had been hearing about since the beginning of the game, but were told not to enter. You enter the great crater in order to access Area Zero, where the professor has gone to devote their time to inventing a time machine and researching Paradox Pokemon, which are essentially Pokemon from the future or the past. This all ties into the initial reason that Arvin was there in the first place. That's why Mabostiff was so critically injured, because of that time machine. You fight through a number of Paradox Pokemon, taking names and unlocking research stations until you finally reach the lab, where the professor reveals to you that they are just an AI version of themselves. And the real professor died a long time ago in an attempt to protect the legendary mascot from the Paradox Pokemon. Yes, a human character in this main story died. How often do you see that in these games? A professor, no less. This AI version of the professor tells you how to shut down the time machine and stop the Pokemon from appearing. But we learn that the AI was also programmed by the real professor to stop you at all costs and warns you that you will have to battle them and defeat them first. Please defeat me. This battle against the professor is followed by another final battle, the professor's legendary Pokemon versus yours, that being Koraidon/Miraidon. You defeat the professor, shut down the time machine, and that's all she wrote. During these final moments of the main story, I felt a wide range of emotions. The shock of finding out that somebody died, the sadness Arvin must have felt when finding out about this was emotionally piercing, though he made it very known that he had a feeling this whole time that his parent was long gone. The fear that I felt when the professor went into full lockdown defense mode and you could literally read his robotic speech in the text. The adrenaline rush as my unsurprisingly underleveled team went up against a full 6 stack of Paradox Pokemon was beyond intense. I haven't felt emotions like this in a Pokemon game probably since the Gen 5 games, and God, I missed it. This game definitely had a story that tops most that I played, and will hold a special place in my memory for the future games to come. And of course, lastly, one of my absolute favorite things about new Pokemon games are, well, the new Pokemon. There's always a sort of excitement to stepping into this undiscovered world, seeing new Pokemon for the very first time. It's like a Pokeball. What are you? Violet Nuzz. What the fuck is that thing, bro? Why does it look like that? Oh! What are you? Orthworm? The new designs, the regional variants, the evolutions. Just learning everything brings me the same amount of excitement that it brought me as a kid. Some of my new favorite Pokemon include Meowscarada, Clodsire, Tandemaus and Maushold, the Knackley evolution line, Annihilape, which just learned that this was a ghost fighting type, by the way. How sick is that? Armarouge and Ceruledge, Mabostiff, Cloth, Scovillain, Reverum, Orthworm, Kingambit, Tatsugiri, Baxcalibur, Goldengo, and of course the Paradox Pokemon. Some of my favorites being Screamtail, Fluttermane, Roaring Moon, Iron Jugulus, and Iron Thorns. You know, a friend once told me that Nintendo could take a literal shit on my doorstep and I would throw money at it. And you know, I don't disagree with that statement. When Sword and Shield announced $30 DLC that essentially just added more Pokemon to the game that should have been accessible to begin with, I bought it. I did the same with this game, knowing how many bugs were affecting people's experience with it. Pokemon has just been such a huge part of my life for as long as I can remember, and playing the new games has always felt exciting and rewarding. So who am I to deny myself that continued experience? I will admit, I had more gripes with Scarlet and Violet than I thought I did. Because, let's be honest, there is a lot wrong with it. But nonetheless, it is a Pokemon game, and I am not a hard person to please. The 3 different storylines tugged on the heartstrings in just the right way, and had a certain depth to them, unlike anything I've ever seen in a main series title. The characters were unique, and didn't feel like they were just there to be there. The new Pokemon introduced in this gen were unique, and we're given the proper spotlight through gym battles, titan battles, and star raids. The open world mechanic is something we only got a sneak preview of in Gen 8 prior to these games, and while causing a lot of bugs and being almost virtually useless, gives us a taste of potential. Maybe Game Freak can take a couple of pointers from their audience and use that to improve on this mechanic in the future. But please, don't make another open world Pokemon game. I don't want it. At the end of all of this, I can confidently say that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are some of the games ever. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking the video and subscribing if you enjoyed, as I plan to do more Pokemon-centered content going forward on this channel. I had a lot of fun making this video and reflecting on my experience with these fairly new titles, and it definitely gave me a newfound appreciation for just how much goes into these games, even if they're not the best. Well, that's all for me. So once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again very soon.